Hello everyone, my name is Varun. Today we are going to discuss about F5 LTM I rules. So let's have some basic discussion about I rules, what I rules are. So if we talk about iRules, an iRule is a powerful and flexible feature for a big IP device based on F5's exclusive TMOS architecture. iRules provide you an control to directly manipulating and manage any application traffic. So what iRule does is, by using iRule, you can manipulate the IP traffic. What you can do, you can like if you have two pools in a and if you want a request coming to a virtual server should go to different pools, you can do that. Let's say if you have virtual server A and you have two pools, pool A and pool B, so the request which is coming to virtual server A can go to pool A and some requests can go to pool B. This can be achieved by iRule. Another most use case is HTTPS redirect. So if someone is accessing the website that is supposed to be accessed using 443 port, and if someone do HTTP to that website, by using iRule we can redirect it to HTTPS. So what are the components of iRules? So the very first component of iRule is event. So an event is something which triggers the iRule. So whenever we create a iRule, we set event upon which the iRule will be applicable. So event can be HTTP request, client SSL, client cert, RTSP response. So we can say, if there is an HTTP request, then redirect it to HTTPS request. So event is something which trigger the iRule. Operators. When you compare two value, you will see an operator to do the comparison. So operator is used to compare two values. Let's say if I say that if the IP of the client is X, then the request should go to pool B. So what I am doing is I am doing a comparison, like equal to, greater than, that for that particular thing operators are used. Then statements. Statement are the command that typically don't return a value. So statement something like if else, in which you put some conditions, whereas the last one is commands. With command you can do things like URI of HTTP request, means you can call the URI value of HTTP request using the commands. So what template do we use for iRules? So the first thing, to initiate the iRule you have to use when. Like this is an when event, means if I'll say if there is an HTTP request, then redirect the traffic to HTTPS, right? So that when is something that trigger the request. And then if condition expression, let's say if I say if a HTTP request is from X host, then redirect it to HTTPS. So that is the condition. Then the action is the redirection, and if this condition is not met, then else. Okay, so we will be working on some of the iRules. Okay, let me just show you from where we can configure the iRules. So this is my lab environment. Okay, so though you can, for checking the iRules, you have to go to local traffic. Under local traffic there is an option for iRules. So these are pre-configured iRules which come with the F5 load balancer. So whereas you can also create your own iRules. So this is the system defined iRule for redirecting the HTTPS traffic, right? Or you can say redirecting the HTTP traffic to HTTPS. Okay, similarly we will be doing two examples today. First, we will be creating a rule to redirect HTTPS traffic. Though there is a system defined iRule, but we will still creating a new one. So in order to create a new iRule, just go to iRule list, click add. Now I'll just name it as test underscore HTTP and HTTPS redirect. Okay, now first thing is to define the event when this iRule will be triggered. So defining an event start from when, right? Then you have to write the event. Let's say I say when there is an HTTP request. So I'll just write when HTTP. So I'm saying this iRule will be triggered when there will be an HTTP request. Then we have to open the we have to go inside when statement, right? That when event. Now we have to, either we can use if else loop. Let's say we can say if there is an HTTP request from this person, then do that. Otherwise, if we want to redirect all the HTTP requests to HTTPS, we can simply write the action First we have written the event, now we will write the action. We can simply write that whenever there is an HTTP request, redirect to, we can simply write HTTPS. So we can so this is the simple iRule to redirect all the HTTP traffic. So what we have done, we have first defined an event that this iRule will trigger when there will be an HTTP request, right? And though, you know, like while configuring the iRule, you can also take help from here. It gives the the idea about what exactly you need to done. See, like this is when used to specify an event. So when we have to specify an event, there's also an example which you might take help from. So it is giving an example of when client accepted. That means when the client established the connection, then this thing will trigger. So we are using when HTTP request. We are saying whenever there will be an HTTP request, this iRule will trigger. Now we are not using if else here because we are not putting any condition. We are simply giving an action. So either you can go first event, then you can put if else condition, then action. But here, as we have to redirect all the traffic, we are simply saying when HTTP request. Again, this redirect, if you want to check what redirect does, is just click over it and it will show you redirects an HTTP to a specific location. And there is also an example, like when you see what we are doing, when HTTP request redirects to this thing. Now we have set redirect to HTTPS. Now we have written this because we are saying that you have to redirect is to this particular URL. We are using these this statement to just to say that whatever the whatever the IP or the host was there in the HTTP request, just redirect is to HTTPS, and we can simply save it. Now we'll check if this works or not. So just to show you the environment that we are having, so this is our environment. We are having one virtual big IP and two web servers. So let me power on the other web server as well. One is web server 1 and other one is web server 2. These are hosting the web at port 80. They are listening at port 80 for web services. So I'll just power it on this web server as well for our practical purpose. Now if we go back to the big IP configuration, we have two pools configured here. As we only have two servers, so for a practical purpose we have configured two pools. One is web server pool, that is and the pool member of this particular pool is so this for this pool, the pool member is web server 1 and the IP is 192.168.31.5. This pool is down because we have just power on that web server. Once it will be up, the service monitor will come up and this server will come up. This pool. Again we have a second pool which is having the web server 2 and whose IP is 192.168.31.6. We have configured one virtual server, which is this one, which we will be using now. This is our virtual server that we will be using. See, this virtual server is listening at port 80. And in order to apply the iRule, we have to go to resources. This server is using the web server pool 1 and we have to define a iRule here. So I want to define a iRule that I have created now. So I go to manage and I'll just take this one out and put this one in and finish. Now we have applied the iRule on this virtual server. So this is the virtual server, which is whose IP is 192.168.110.2. Still it is down. I believe the server is not yet up. Okay. Let me just start the services of this server. Once this server will come up, my virtual server will come up automatically once the service monitor is up. Now this server is up. Let me check the virtual server is up or not. Let me just refresh it. So once the server come up, my load balancer is also up. So this is the IP of the load balancer. So before testing the iRule, let me just remove that iRule first and see what is the result now and what would be the result after applying the iRule. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this iRule for now. Okay, now if I try to access this virtual server, now when I try to access this virtual server, I will be redirected to the I will be transferred to the pool member that is listening at port 80. So that is our web server 1. So when we access the virtual IP now, we are getting into the web server 192.168.31.5. Okay, now let's apply the iRule that we have configured. So now let's again try to access this web server, this virtual IP. See, now it is redirected to an HTTPS. Now why we are getting this big IP? Because the virtual server IP that I am using here is same as the external IP. So as soon as as soon as that iRule worked, the HTTP request on this IP is redirected to the HTTPS request, and we come into this page as the virtual server IP is same as the external IP of the F5 load balancer. So our iRule works. So let me just again brief you what we have done in the iRule. So in this example number 1, we have written very simple iRule. What we have said that whenever there will be an HTTP request, means whenever someone accesses the HTTP, whenever a virtual server receives the HTTP request, what we have to do is, this is our event, or you can say this is our condition, right? And what would be the action if this condition is met is redirect to HTTPS and this IP. So what we have done is, okay, so what we have done over here is we have sent redirect to HTTPS, and in this inverted comma we have to write where we have to redirect. So we have to give some particular value, right? So what I have done in the example is I have said that the request to be redirected to the HTTP host. So what we have to do is, whatever the IP that is coming in the initial HTTP request, same to be redirected to the HTTPS. So this is the iRule1 which we have configured. Now we will be doing one more example. As we have two virtual servers, so we have created two different pools. One is web server pool 1 and another one is web server pool 2. Right now what we will be doing, that the request that is going to us virtual server for a particular traffic will go to other pool, to non-default pool member. So again let me show you. So as of now the default pool for this pool member is web server pool, for this virtual server is web server pool. Now what we will be doing is we will configure an iRule such that the request coming to this virtual server will not go to this default pool. Instead it will go to web server pool 2. Okay, so in this case again, when we are going to trigger the iRule when there is an HTTP request, because the person who will be accessing this virtual server will be accessing it over HTTP, because our web servers are listening on port 18, not on port 443. Okay, now we have to put now condition. If this is an if loop, right? If client address, this is our object client address, equals, this is our operator, and this is what we are comparing. We are saying if our client address equals to 192.168.110.1, that is our this system IP from where we are accessing it, then you have to take the request to pool web server to pool whose name is web server pool 2. So let's try to configure it. So if I go to iRules again, so if you configure iRule, it itself give some explanation, and it is very helpful. Like say if I say pool underscore iRule, okay, so first I have to say when, and if you want to check what when does, you can simply click on it, right? It shows what is the use of when. Now as we are saying that we are doing it for HTTP request, there is a syntax with it. So if you want to introduce an HTTPS request, then you can use this in small letters, but for HTTP you have to use it in capital letter, because if I use HTTP in small letter, I'll not get an option for HTTP request. So it itself gives us the possible options which are here. So HTTP request is not here, so that means I have to use the capital letters. Okay, now I get an option for HTTP request. So now I am saying whenever there is an HTTP request, now I have to open the loop. Now I am putting if loop. I have to match a condition, right? At what condition there will be this event will trigger, right? This iRule will be effective. So I again open a loop and I write if for something we are comparing, right? For something we are comparing for by a particular value, we have to use these bracket. Okay, what I write here, I write client address. So what I am comparing, that whenever a request comes for a particular client, the virtual server should forward the request to non-default pool. So our default pool is web server pool, our non-default pool is web server pool 2. So for this particular client address, we will be sending the request to web server pool 2, and for all other web servers the request will still go to web server pool. So I'll just put client address. Now there should be an operator. As we discussed, these are the possible operators which we have. So what we will be saying that whenever the client IP equals to this system IP, so we will be using the operator equals, or we can either use contain as well, but here we will be using an operator equals. So we can use either contain, we can use start with, okay, we can use equal. So here I will be using equals. Now if I again click over it, it will show me for, okay, it will not show for operator that what it can does, but it shows for for this when or if loop. If you again click on if, it will show you what all you can do with if. Okay, so I'm saying if my client address equals to this system IP, which is 192.168.1110.1, okay, now I have to close this if loop. Now again, what would be the action? Action would be pool. So I am saying if this particular condition is met, then I have this action, that is pool. So see, if I want to see what this particular this particular pool action can does is causes the system to load balance traffic to a specific pool. So using this pool keyword, I can cause the system to load balance traffic to a specific pool or pool member. So now I have to define the pool name. So the other pool name that I have is web server pool 2. Okay, so I just write web server. This is again anything which is user defined or which I am defining, I have to write it in inverted comma, sorry. So I'll just write web server pool. But this is again so you know, we need not to use inverted comma here, because this pool is not defined by us, it is already configured in the big IP. So we'll just remove this one from here. Okay, and we have to first close the if loop, then we have to close the when loop. Now let's save this iRule. So there is some error with this iRule. Okay, see here what we are doing, here's the error showing that the error is with this statement. So what we are saying, if the client address, so we are comparing something from this particular object, that is client address. That is why we have used this you can say this bracket, right? So whatever thing is user defined, it should be under inverted comma. So as we are saying that this thing should be compared with client address, and this is something which I am defining, I have to always use an inverted comma. Now if I save it, it will get saved. So now it's saved, right? Now let's go back to our virtual server. First I will remove the previous iRule that I have configured here. So for that I have to go to virtual server, then to resources, and I simply remove this from here. Okay, now again I'll just try to access the web server. So now once we have removed the previous HTTP redirect iRule, we are still forwarded to 192.168.31.5. That is the part of our web server pool. That is a default pool in the virtual server. Now once we'll apply our new iRule, we will be forwarded to a second pool, and the IP will be 192.168.31.6. So let's see. So now I go to the resources, and I go to manage, and I say that I want to use this iRule. So in this iRule, what I have told the F5 to redirect me to this web server pool, and the IP in this web server pool is 192.168.31.6. So now once this iRule is applied, I will be forwarded to 192.168.31.6. So let's refresh it. Let me again access it. Just close it and reopen it. Sorry. So let me 192.168.110.2. Let me again try to access it. Okay, the iRule is not working. Let me just try to disable and re-enable the virtual server again. Let me just first check whether the iRule is applied or not. So let's check whether the iRule is applied or not. So iRule is applied. So what I'll do, I'll just disable and enable this virtual server for the changes to take place. So let me re-enable the virtual server. Now my virtual server is enabled, so I'm going to again access this IP. It's still not working. Let me check whether we have given the correct pool name in the iRule or not. So we can go directly from here. So this is our iRule. Okay, so we have we have still given web server pool, which is the default pool. That is why it is again taking us to the same server. So we have to define web server pool 2 here. Okay, now I'll update this thing because I have given the incorrect name of the web server pool. That is why it was not working. Now the iRule is corrected. Just to recheck, we have let me cross check the name of the web pool. Okay, so this is the right pool. Okay, now it should work. See, now we have been forwarded to 192.168.31.6, which is part of this web server pool, and it is not a default pool for that virtual server, but using the iRule we have instructed the virtual server not to forward the request to the default pool, instead to forward the request to the second pool. So this is how iRule work. So we have again, just to tell you, we have what we have done. First of all, we have given an event when this particular iRule will trigger, when there will be an HTTP request. Okay, then we start our our bracket, our loop. Then there we put an if loop. In if loop, what we have said, that if the client address then an operator that is equals to 192.168.110.1, then you have to take us to the pool web server pool 2. So anything that that is user defined, or we are saying that this thing should be equal, then we have to write it in inverted commas, and anything which we are comparing should be in this bracket. So this is how it works. So we have another example, that is iRule to perform SNET for a particular traffic. So in this iRule, what we will be doing, we will be doing a source net for a particular traffic, that is for the traffic which is coming from our system. So this I will be discussing in my next class. Meanwhile, if you know the solution, please post in the comment section, and we can have further discussion on that. And if you like this video, please do subscribe to my channel. Thank you.